Greetings to you and welcome to session 50 on the Gospel of John. I'm Pastor Timothy Muse, lead pastor here at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Alliance, Ohio. It's a joy to be with you today as we spend this time together. I want to thank you for investing in this. As I've always said, time is our greatest commodity. Time is our greatest investment. It's far easier to acquire resources than it is time. And so for you to invest this time, I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the opportunity to continue to walk with you through the Gospel of John and find these greater resources and this greater growth and this greater understanding. So thanks for being part of this. Thanks for investing in it. I would certainly encourage you to share it out there. If you connected with this through any of the social media posts or through the website, please share it out there so that others can get a hold of it and can access it. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's where all this stuff pops up, and so that you can be able to access it and follow it accordingly, and then also to be able to share it. So every time a new episode pops up, then the YouTube channel will indicate it. If you subscribe, then the YouTube channel will indicate it, and you'll know it. So definitely pop it up. Subscribe to me. Follow us. If you're connecting to this through the website, then thank you for that. If you're a first-time listener, then welcome to the series. We're pretty far in. We're in sessions 50. But that doesn't mean that you have to stop listening. You can keep listening now. There's a lot of good stuff that you'll get out of this session. But I certainly would encourage you to go back and listen to the previous sessions and listen to all the things that we've talked about up to this point. That would be awesome. If you're continuing on in this session, then if you're a returning listener, then thank you for returning and welcome back. And I hope that this session offers as much to you as the previous sessions have. So this is session 50 on the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is the fourth book in the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's the fourth Gospel. So I invite you to find that. I would invite you to have a Bible open before you if you can. If you're listening to this while doing something else, which is perfectly acceptable, I listen to a lot of stuff when I'm at the gym or when I'm outside working. So if you can have a Bible open before you, I would encourage you to do that. If you can't, then I get that too. But having a Bible open, if you can, it helps us to be able to read along and see the words and hear the things that are taking place. So it helps us to have biblical accuracy, as it would be called, biblical accuracy. So follow along, read along if you can. If you can't, then great. I'm just glad that you're listening. Translation doesn't matter. Paraphrase, whether you're using the NRSV, which is what I use, or the Message, or the Living Bible, or whatever. As long as you have a Bible open in front of you. And we see in biblical study that when there's multiple Bibles, when you have multiple translations, you learn multiple things. And that's really quite fascinating. It's really quite a good thing. So I would really encourage you to, read the Bible and have different translations. I think it's great. And you can share and you can see where things are different. So we're in chapter 18. Chapter 18, we're well into the book now. So we're in chapter 18, so I would invite you to go there as we are now what's known as the Passion. This is the Passion narrative of the Savior. It is here that we have, the stories of his trial and his crucifixion and all that. So that's where we are in the midst of this right now. We're in the midst of the Passion, and the Passion story is a really powerful and a great story for us. So that's where we've entered into last week, and we're going to pick up here today in this week. All right, so let's get into this here. So we're in the Passion narrative. We're in this place where Jesus has been arrested. He's been detained by the temple police, and where we found him, not where we found him, but where we left off last week was he was at the home of the high priest, at the home of Annas, who was the one who recommended that Jesus be arrested, that Jesus be killed. So he's at the home of Annas. He's in the courtyard of the high priest at this point in time. And Peter has already denied Christ the first time. Remember, Jesus predicted. Jesus said that Peter would deny him 3 times. He's already denied him the first time when he came in. And the denial, again, there wasn't necessarily an accusation that came across when he denied Jesus. He wasn't being accused of being a follower. It was questioned. He was questioned about whether he was a follower of Jesus, and he denied it because he wanted to come into the temple court, and he knew that if he acknowledged the Savior, then he wouldn't be allowed in. So he denied knowing the Savior as a way to get into the temple, as a way to get into the courtyard and be part of what was going on. So he used his, again, and if we remember, Roman fear, when we studied the book of Revelation, we talked about the idea of the Romans being so afraid of being so afraid of internal strife. So they always were looking out for usurpers and rebellious people. And so the Romans were afraid of this. They were afraid that they were going to have this. So what happened was that they would always question. So this was kind of a questioning more than anything else. Think, kind of TSA. Security checkpoint going into an airport. That's what was happening. So Peter denies Jesus the first time. The woman asked him, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you? You're not part of this, are you? Because I'm not going to let you in if you are." And Peter denies it. No, I don't know this guy. I'm not part of what this guy's doing. Okay, so that is what lets him in. And now Peter is standing. He's really standing around the slaves and the police. Those who actually came to arrest Jesus in the garden, he's now kind of standing with them. And again, we've talked about this before, this idea that, facial recognition, people aren't paying attention. People don't pay attention to each other like we do now. We pay attention to each other a lot now. A lot of facial recognition, a lot of faces all over the place. But you have to understand, in the ancient world, in the ancient mind, people just didn't recognize each other. There just wasn't the recognition one to the other. That was just the nature of humanity at the time. Things are different now. Of course, things are very different now. But at the time, they weren't. At the time, that's what it was. That's how things worked out. So Peter could be standing with the temple police and the guards, and they're not going to pay attention. They're not going to know that it's him. They're not going to be like, "Oh, hey, didn't we just see you 20 minutes ago out in the garden when we arrested and beat up your teacher?" No, they're not going to say that. Very few people. And again, I don't want this to sound bad, and I know that these types of words have been used throughout history for racial overtones and racism, and that's not meant to be. It's not meant to be that. But everybody looks very similar. I mean, a man in the Middle East at the time of Jesus, they all pretty much dressed the same because there was very few variation in clothing. They kept their hair about the same, their beard about the same. So the external features were very similar. So there was very much a uniformity. That was part of the Jewish code. That was part of the Jewish rite, was that, kind of uniformity of, so I mean, maybe someone was taller or shorter, but overall there was enough similarity that you really couldn't distinguish. And it was at night. So Peter's standing with the police and the slaves. I mean, he's standing with the very people that arrested Jesus, which is odd, but it's not unusual. It's not out of the question. He's standing with the very people that arrested Jesus. And so he's standing there with them, and he is warming himself by the fire. And that's where we pick up in our reading of the gospel today. And what's going to happen now is we're going to see multiple narratives taking place, overlapping. So the story now, we've had we've seen this a lot, mostly about Jesus with some of the Pharisees, but now we're going to see the story diverge, and we're going to see a lot of it open up around the priest, the high priest, and the interaction with Jesus, and with the interaction with Peter. So this is chapter 18, verse 19 and following. Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogue and in the temple where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said." When he had said this, one of him standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered, "If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. All right, so this is fear tactic. This is backroom, backdoor fear tactic. So what Annas is doing, Annas is the father-in-law of Caiaphas. Caiaphas obviously is married to his daughter. And what Annas is trying to do is Annas is trying to intimidate Jesus into submission, which, you know what I mean? Really, if you think about it, the power differential between Jesus and Annas. I mean, Annas is holding all the cards and Jesus is holding none. So the power differential is huge. Of course, there's going to be that power, there's going to be that desire, and hopefully this can be resolved. I mean, we want to resolve this quickly. We want to resolve this easily. So what Annas is trying to do is Annas is trying to threaten Jesus into submission. Annas is trying to flex the kingdom's muscles into submission. Now, keep in mind, if Jesus wanted to save his life, if Jesus was looking to save his life, well, then that's exactly what would have happened. He would have bowed down. He would have, mea culpa, I'm sorry, forgive me, I repent, and he would have gone off into the distance if he was trying to save his life. But the fact of the matter is he wasn't trying to save his life. He was not trying to survive. He was bringing the message of the kingdom. So because he was bringing the message of the kingdom, it's a very different reality. It's a very different posture. Jesus is not looking to try to save himself. So when this weight is brought to bear, he is not intimidated by it. Jesus is not threatened by Annas or by Caiaphas. Jesus is not threatened by any of this. He actually is reveling in it, in living into it. He's not threatened by this. This is not a threat for Jesus. This is not a threat for the Savior. This is actually what needs to happen, because it is through this route that Jesus is going to experience what will ultimately be his glory. So, but you can see the scenario, and Jesus is very right. Jesus never taught in secret. He always taught publicly. He was always out and about in the world. He always taught publicly to those around him. He never, he didn't teach in secret. I mean, he taught in secret with the disciples, of course, but he never taught in secret the message of God. The message of God was always open to everyone. He taught in the synagogue. So the idea of the secret questioning. So this is very much reminiscent of Nicodemus. Remember Nicodemus way back in the beginning of the gospel. Nicodemus came to Jesus in secret. Because, look, let's be clear about what's happening here. Those who are in power know that this Jesus fellow is right. They know that he is from God. They know that he is going to turn things upside down, and they're powerless to stop it publicly, because this is what the people want. This is what the masses are calling for. They're calling for a public, they're calling for a redemption in God's eyes, and Jesus is bringing it. And so if the leaders don't acknowledge what Jesus is doing, then they're going to find themselves in a really, really difficult place. They're going to find themselves in a really, really difficult place. I'm thinking of the story of John the Baptist. So John the Baptist, when the Pharisees are questioning Jesus about John the Baptist, or questioning Jesus, Jesus questions them about John the Baptist. And the question about John the Baptist is Jesus asked the leaders, was John the Baptist God or not, sent from God or not? And the leaders knew that it was a really terrible question, because if they said yes, he was from God, why'd they kill him? But if they said no, he wasn't from God, then they risked angering the people. So if they publicly try Jesus, if they publicly question and deny him, then they risk angering the people. This is the Jewish leadership. So what they're trying to do here, the first part of this is all fear tactics, backroom deals. This is the corruption of the power. The power doesn't want to doesn't want to lose power. So what it's doing is it's trying to intimidate Jesus into silence, into submission. That's why it's happening at night. I mean, look at everything around it. It's at night. No one can see what's going on. It's happening in secret, in quiet, and it's happening at the father-in-law of the high priest's house. So none of this is about fair or equitable judgment or not fair or equitable treatment. All of this is about fear tactics and scare tactics and all of that. So, the high priest questions him about his disciples and about his teachings. So the two things, his disciples, his followers, this band of rebels, this band of rabble-rousers, are these men trouble? Are they going to be trouble for the kingdom? For the Israelites, for Herod and his people, because if they're trouble, then the Romans are just going to sweep in and destroy. That's what the Romans did. That was always the fear. That was the fear of that the Romans would just come in and decimate everything. So are these disciples trouble? Is this a band of rebels that the Romans are going to become very uncomfortable with? And about his teachings. Who are you to teach this, to talk about God like this, yada, yada, yada. And Jesus responds, he doesn't respond. He doesn't answer the question. Jesus doesn't answer the question about his teachings. That's not what he does. Jesus doesn't defend his word. He doesn't defend his actions. He says, look, I've been doing all of this publicly, openly. Don't ask me. Ask those who are listening to me. Ask everybody else. They'll tell you what is going on. So the high priest, Annas, the father-in-law of the high priest, he's trying to get Jesus caught up in a trap. He's trying to get Jesus caught up in an argument, a blasphemy, a heresy, all of these types of things. And Jesus is like, look, don't be pressing on me, dude. Ask those who have heard. Ask those who listen. They'll tell you that. They'll tell you what my teaching is. They'll tell you what's going on. They'll tell you that I point to God. Now, this was not the tactic that Annas wanted. This was not the tactic that Annas wanted to see. He wanted Jesus to bow down. He wanted Jesus to submit to power. So then what we turn to is we turn to brutality. We turn to violence. When he said, why don't you ask them? They know what I said. Talk to the people. Of course, this is like lowbrow. We would never do this. This is the high priest would never talk to the people. The people are scum. They're sinners. They're worthless. They're less than. It's not the high priest's job to talk to the people. It's the high priest's job to tell the people what to think. So the very idea that Jesus would recommend or say that the high priest should talk to the people, that's an insult in and of itself. And for that insult, one of the police come up and strike Jesus. They hit him. Again, so this is all tyrannical tactics. This is fear-based tactics. We see this time and time again. And so this is the weaker trying to best the greater by using these tactics, tripping them up with their words, violence, hurting. I mean, Jesus is getting struck. He's in a pure position of powerlessness, and yet he is being struck over and over. He is being intimidated, threatened by the power structure. This is all of the stuff that goes on in this is, so Jesus is faced with this intimidation tactics, these fear tactics, and violence. I mean, he literally gets struck in the face. When he had said this, when he had said to the chief priest, I've said all this openly to the world. Go ask them. Go ask the people that hear about what my words are. Then one of the police come up and strike him in the face. This would not have been a love tap. Okay. This would have been bone crushing. Most likely, there would have probably, they probably would have had a weapon of some kind, a cudgel or a stick or a club. But even if not, I mean, these police, they're decked out in armor. Their chests, their arms, their hands. So Jesus wouldn't have just been, smacked with an open face. Or with an open hand. He would have been hit. This would have been brutal. It was the preamble, the foretaste of the violence to come in this. And Jesus knew it. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew that Jesus was going to face some terrible violence. And he did. Some terrible aggression. And he did. That was ultimately his glory. So Jesus is struck. Is that how you answer the high priest? All right, again, here's those intimidation tactics. You're going to be asked a question, you will give a specific answer, and if you don't give that specific answer, you'll pay the price for it. So the high priest didn't care about the truth. The high priest just wanted the answer the high priest wanted in order to be able to bring things to fruition. Because if Jesus would have recanted, he'd have been sent off, imprisoned, whatever, made fun of, rebuked, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't. He actually called out the high priest to talk to the people, and he got struck in the face for it. He got struck in the face, and he turns and he says, look, if I've spoken wrong, then point out the wrong. But if I haven't spoken wrong, what's up with the attack? What's up with the assault? This is clearly bully tactics. And that's exactly what this is. Again, and look at where it's at, who it is. This is not legal. It's done at night. No one's paying attention. This is all bully tactics. And Jesus is very clear in other times, what's said in the dark will come into the light. The truth will make you free. All of these things to show that the darkness of evil, the pall of evil and the devil has fallen over God's people. And Jesus has come to reveal the light to that, and it's going to cost him. And this is the first part of it costing him. So Jesus says, if I have spoken to the wrong, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken to the right, why do you strike me? Why do you use violence to respond against things that don't have any violent overtones? Why are you striking me if I haven't done anything? If I've done something wrong, point it out. But if I haven't done anything wrong, that I don't deserve to be hit. I don't deserve to be unjustly aggressed. And that's what Jesus is saying. Well, and so then Annas is like, all right, well, then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now, again, look at the scenario. Look at how Jesus is being treated. He's being treated like a criminal. Bound, which means he was probably cuffed, escorted by the police, escorted by the military to the actual high priest. So this is the plea bargain, if you will. This is the backroom deal in the interrogation room. Say something, and then we don't have to go any further. But Annas realizes that Jesus is not going to play this game. Jesus is not going to deal. Keep in mind that what Annas and Caiaphas want to avoid, Jesus wants to do. Even Pilate, when we get to that point, we'll see that Pilate wants to avoid this as well. Everybody wants Jesus to recant and disappear. Nobody wants to kill him, because it brings a great deal of public awareness. Nobody wants to go down that road. Everybody wants Jesus to just disappear. Just stop being a menace. Just stop speaking these words of God. Go away, disappear, and everybody will be happy. That is the game. The problem is the only one who doesn't want to do that is Jesus. Now look, anybody else in human existence, if they're caught up in something particularly unjustly, they're going to look for a way to do whatever they can to get out of it. Even if they're guilty as sin, if somebody's going to give them an out, they're going to take it. They're going to want to take it. But here is Jesus not only not wanting to take it, but pressing for something different. Jesus is pressing for this assault. He's pressing for this conclusion. Everybody wants it to stop, but Jesus is pressing for the conclusion, and that's where it's at. So, and that's what we have. We have Jesus bound and drawn off to a formal trial. Okay, what we had with Annas was informal, backroom, collusion, terror, bully threats. Now we're going to a formal trial to Caiaphas. Okay, so we carry on. This is chapter 25, or verse 25, chapter 18, verse 25. Now Simon Peter was standing warming himself. They asked him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" And he denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Again Peter denied it, and at that moment the cock crowed 3 times. At that time, the cock crowed. Sorry. So Peter's standing by the fire. So here's that other narrative. So you have the narrative of Jesus. Jesus was with Annas and then sent off to Caiaphas, and now we're going to revert over to Peter. We're going to revert over to the narrative of Peter. We have Peter standing at the fire. Remember, he came into the courtyard. The woman at the gate asked him, you're not part of this, are you? And he's like, no, I'm not part of it. So now he's standing by the fire. Remember, Jesus said he was going to deny him 3 times. What's the significance of that? I want to kind of pull it across to the side. The significance of denying 3 times is that takes conscious effort. Okay, I think any of us in reactionary response, in impulsiveness, we can do something once. Okay, maybe eat too much, or maybe say something we shouldn't have said, or accept something we shouldn't have accepted. We can do that in impulsiveness and reactionariness and all of that. We can find ourselves one time doing what we shouldn't do, and then go, oh, maybe I need to not do this. Okay, so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I many of you know, most of you know, I love donuts. I'm a big donut fan. And so if I walk into a room and there's donuts, and I'm compelled to take one, okay. So I'm responding on impulse. The first round is I'm responding on impulse. I'm impulsively taking a donut, okay? But then to take a second and third donut, I have to put myself in that situation. I have to go back in there or stay in there, okay? The first donut may be an impulse, but the second and third one, that's a pretty conscious choice, all right? So that's what we're seeing with Peter. The first time Peter was addressed with this, when the woman at the gate asked him, are you with this man? Are you part of this? Peter knew in order to get in, he was impulsive. No, I'm not part of this. I'm not part of this. I don't want to get hurt. I'm not part of this. Now, what Peter should have done is Peter should have thought, wow, I mean, I better remove myself from this, because if I don't, somebody else is going to ask me. And now I'm thinking about it. Now I'm making a conscious choice to deny him. And that's what Peter does. Twice he makes a conscious choice to deny Jesus. Twice he is asked about Jesus, and twice he denies him after making a conscious choice in this. It's not just a one-off. The first one may have been a one-off, but the second and third time, he is allowing himself to stay in a moment where he's going to be asked again, and he will have to choose. And that choice will be a conscious choice to deny the Savior, and that's what we see. So he goes in, now he's standing at the fire, and the conscious choice the second time around, they asked him, that would be the people around, because this is a stranger. I mean, keep in mind, it's a pretty small group of people. So this is a stranger, and how coincidental that a stranger is showing up at the charcoal fire while this rabble-rouser Jesus is being tried and accused. So, of course, what would you ask? You would ask, are you part of this? That would be akin to saying you're having a music festival in a very small town, and all of these people are showing up, and this stranger bellies up to the restaurant table to order lunch, and the question, are you with the music festival? Okay, where are you from? Are you from out of town? So, again, not necessarily anything real nefarious in the question or accusatory, but more along the lines of, hey, there's 8 or 9 people standing here, and there's somebody standing around us that we don't know. Are you part of this? Are you with this man? Are you part of what's going on here? Again, in the Romans, to which then the Israelites, the Jews, would have been very suspicious. They would have been very cautious of anything outside of themselves. And he says, no, I'm not. I'm not part of this, okay? I'm not part of this. So now the second time, that was a conscious effort. He knew that question was coming. He knew that the possibility was there, and he allowed himself to stay there. He allowed himself to be part of the question. Like anything else, if you're going to change your pattern and you want God to help you, you've got to make sure that which you're changing from, you don't surround yourself with. All right. It's very hard to quit drinking when you go to a bar every night. All right. It just is, because sooner or later you're just marinating in it. Peter allowed himself to stay in a place that was already being questioned, and that's how it worked. But Peter insists on staying here. I mean, he's already been asked twice. He's already second time denied that he knows Jesus again. And some of this is out of, just kind of national concern. Some of it is out of other things. But then he remains there. And this is where the intentionality of it really comes through. Because now there's someone at the fire pit who seems to recognize him. The first two were just kind of coincidental. There's a lot going on. This is a really weird time to have somebody, blah, blah, blah. But now somebody actually recognizes. Somebody says, hey, weren't you the one with the sword? Weren't you the one that did what, somebody's ear got cut off? There was a violent altercation between Peter and the slave to the high priest. And so, didn't I see you in the garden with him? This would be, a relative. One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Now, this is a direct accusation. This is a direct statement of recognition. This is something that Peter could have avoided if he would have stayed out of the fire ring, if he would have stayed out of the light. This is something Peter could have avoided if he wouldn't have gone into the courtyard at all. He could have gone in, looked around a little bit, and left, or gone into a corner. But Peter hedged his bet. He wanted to kind of blend in. Well, now there's enough of a recognition. Remember, I did say that everybody kind of looked the same. And I know that's used in a very racist sort of way, and I don't want it to sound like that. However, there's a lot of similarity in dress and everything else. So what we have here is we have Peter who is letting himself be set up, or letting himself be recognized. And he was recognized. He was recognized by somebody in the fire ring. And now Peter denied it directly. Okay, so someone asked him directly, didn't I see you with him? And Peter denied it directly. So the first two denials, the first denial was reactionary. I don't think he expected the question. And he knew he had to deny it in order to get in. The second one, he kind of allowed himself to remain there. He should have been prepared for a better answer than that. And the third one, he definitely should have been prepared for, and he denied all three. So it was very intentional. The first one may not have been. That's why Jesus, he didn't deny the importance of him denying Jesus 3 times and not just 1 time. Because there's intentionality to this. There is foresight and thought to this. There's a plan, if you will, even if it's so rudimentary that Peter is going to deny whenever he is asked. And at that point, the cock crowed, and that was what Jesus said. Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And we need to understand. It's kind of funny because I live in. For those of you who know where the church is, it's on the boundary between very rural and very urban. We have very urban realities in our world, but we also have very rural realities, and that rooster crows oftentimes well before dawn. I don't know how farmers didn't have more chicken soup with those things, but nonetheless, the cock crowing would be the indication of morning. That morning was approaching, and that was it. So the darkness that shrouded Jesus and all that happened is going to be revealed in the light of the morning, in the light of the new day. So that's kind of the vision we're getting. We're getting the vision that darkness and shadow is losing out to the light of God. Okay, that is what we want to see here. This interplay of darkness and light, evil and good, shadow and revelation. All of these things are there in the midst of the story. And that cockcrow means that morning is coming, that soon we are going to have daylight, and the new day is going to reveal new things, and that's actually what we see. Okay, so verse 28, then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. Okay, so it's still dark. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, what accusation do you bring against this man? They answered, if this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate said to them, take him yourself and judge him according to your laws. The Jews answered, we are not permitted to put anyone to death. This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. So we really don't get much in the way of the interaction between Jesus and Caiaphas because there's really nothing to say. They can't find any charge against him under Jewish law. He hasn't broken any Jewish law, but they need to eradicate him. They need to up this game here. They can't intimidate him. They can't get him to recant. So now they need to hand him over to the Romans, and they need to let the Romans do their dirty work. So off they go to Pilate. So they take Jesus to Pilate's headquarters. Pilate's headquarters would be like the governor's mansion. And though this is a Jewish town, though Jerusalem is the capital of Judaism, Pilate's headquarters would have been bigger than Herod's temple, Herod's headquarters, because Pilate is the one in charge. Pilate is the one who is overseeing. And that's how the Romans worked. That's how the Romans did what they did. They would take over. They would come in, take over, but then they would leave the existing ruling structure in place only as kind of a puppet king. So the Jews believed that Herod was still in charge, and Herod was still in charge as long as Herod did what Rome wanted Herod to do. As soon as Herod didn't do what Rome wanted Herod to do, then Herod would be displaced, just like any other leader. So Rome is running the show. They let the local leaders do their thing as long as the local leaders do what Rome wants them to do. So Pilate would have been the ruling authority in the region. He was the governor. He was the one assigned by the Roman emperor to oversee this area, including Jerusalem. So it would have been his job to make sure that everything would have been taken care of and everybody would have been following the rules. It would have been his job to make sure that law and order would have been maintained, even if it was done with brutality and fear. Look, the Romans didn't care how. Just that, all right? Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, was found at the tip of a sword. People were at peace because they were afraid. So they take Jesus to Pilate, the governor of the time period. Now, this would have been Roman territory. This would not have been holy ground. Very similar to how we understand embassies today, is that an embassy in a foreign country is national soil. So like the American embassy in England, that soil is American soil. So if you are on the soil of the embassy, you are on in American soil, not English soil, even though the embassy is within the English territory. So same thing. This would have been Roman soil in Jewish land, which is why when they take him, they didn't want to go into the headquarters, they being the chief priests, the scribes, the Pharisees, because they didn't want to be considered defiled or unclean. They wanted to celebrate the Passover, and they couldn't if they would have set foot on, quote, Roman territory. They stay outside. They stay out on holy or sacred or Jewish ground, if you will, while they send Jesus in to face Pilate. Now, Pilate needs to know what this is about. I mean, let's keep in mind, Pilate does not concern himself in local affairs. Pilate concerns himself in Roman affairs. So this whole Jesus thing up to this point, Pilate doesn't care. He probably doesn't even know who this Jesus is or what's going on. He's probably completely clueless. And that's the point. He needs to be completely clueless. There's no point in him knowing. Pilate doesn't know what's going on. Pilate is clueless. And so when Pilate, when this guy shows up at Pilate's door, they're like, he's like, what is this? What do you want? What do you want me to do with this guy? What's the dealio with this guy? What accusation do you bring against this man? I mean, you don't show up at my door unless you've got somebody that you need taken care of. So here we are. Why are you here right before the Passover? What accusation do you bring against this guy? But notice they don't even respond because the accusation is ridiculous. All right. It's trumped up. All their response is, look, if he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him to you. He's a criminal, Jack. Buddy, do something about it. I was going to say something that probably you would hear me say in regular speech, but I'm not going to put on. But they say, look, I mean, if he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him to you. All right. We brought him to you because he's a criminal. And really what they were hoping for, what they were intending to get was Pilate being so blasé, didn't care that he would have drugged Jesus out, had him executed, and that would have been that. Pilate was brutal. He was a brutal man. The Romans were brutal. They didn't care. They controlled the justice. There was no watchdogs looking out to make sure that the Romans were fair. I think the chief priests and the Pharisees and the scribes, they were just hoping that Pilate would be like, you know what, I don't have time for this, go kill him. Take him out back, shoot him in the head, and be done with it. All right, that is what they were hoping for. That's what they were anticipating. That's what they were hedging their bet on. Make all this go away, make it happen, blah, blah, blah. But it didn't work out that way. For some reason, for whatever reason, Pilate decided he didn't want to be involved at all. Pilate decided he didn't want to have anything to do with this. So what does he say? Take him yourself. Take him yourself. So what accusation do you bring against this man? Well, it's all trumped up charges and it's junk. So their response is, if he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him to you. You know, and Pilate being brutal, Pilate's also really smart. So Pilate sees through this and he's like, yeah, I see what's going on here. Take him and do this yourself. You're not going to use me as your weapon of execution when you can't get your own way. And that's what they were trying to do. They wanted to use the Romans to execute Jesus so they could clean their hands. And, you know, and they're like, look, we don't have a law. We can't put someone to death. We're not permitted to put anyone to death, which, okay, no. That is completely untrue. You know, there are provisions when we read through the Old Testament, when we read through the New Testament. Remember when we back in chapter 8, when Jesus experienced the woman caught in adultery and they were going to stone her to death. You know, Jesus saved her life not by saying it's illegal to kill someone, but he called out their hypocrisy. Okay. But even that's the case, they still have laws to put people to death. So they're trying to come across with this idea that they can't put anybody to death. Well, they can. The Jews, I mean, there's laws and provisions. There's a lot of laws and provisions if you read through the Old Testament of putting someone to death for breaking the law of God. The problem here is that Jesus hasn't broken the law of God. They don't have any substantive reason. If they had a substantial reason, a blasphemy, a heresy, then they'd just put him to death. They wouldn't have even involved the Romans. But the fact is, in order to save their own face, for one thing, in the eyes of the people, but also to save the face of everything, they need to employ the Romans to do this. They need to employ the Romans. They need to lean on the Romans in order to make this happen. So Pilate sees right through this. Pilate's just like, yeah, I got what you're doing here, and this ain't it. Pilate sees right through everything that's taking place here. So what's happening is, what's happening here is that Pilate is very clear about what's happening. He sees the jealousy, he sees everything. It's like, we don't have a law to put him to death. Well, yeah, they do, but they don't have a reason to put him to death, but they want to kill him. Again, and they were hoping that Pilate would just be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Let's just go ahead and execute this guy. I've got dinner reservations at LeBlanc at 5 with the wife. And so kill him and let's be done. But that's not what happens. That's not what happens. Pilate, and again, and we can certainly talk here about God. I mean, this is all ordained by God. We can talk about God intervention, that God is intervening, that God is working on behalf of making sure that this works out a certain way. But Pilate doesn't just kill. which may have been outside the way of Pilate acting. Pilate was, like I said, a pretty brutal guy. But he pushes it back onto the Jews. He pushes it back onto the people. Now, remember, Pilate wants to keep peace. The Jews want to keep peace. Everybody wants to keep peace, because if peace doesn't stay, then garrisons come in and people get hurt, and that's not what anybody wants. So Pilate's like, look, I understand what's going on here. I'm going to read between the lines. You guys are a bunch of idiots. Take him and kill him yourself, because I'm not going to get involved in this. This is your fight, not mine. And they're like, well, we can't. We're not permitted to put anyone to death. We're not permitted to take care of this ourselves. We're coming to you for peace, because this is your job. Remember, this is the hard part about being the overseer, is you got to do the dirty work when the dirty work is required. You can't just eat all the grapes without planting the vine. It doesn't work that way. So they're coming to Pilate to respond to this, and Pilate's like, all right, fine, whatever. I'll take care of it. I'm on it. Here we go. But what we're seeing here is we're seeing how, again, and the whole time, it's very unclear why Jesus is being tried. The Jews haven't articulated it. The high priest didn't articulate it. This is all trumped up stuff. All trumped up charges. This is exactly what's taking place. It's all trumped up charges. It's all a lie. It's all fake. And that's what needs to be understood. This is all fake. It's all a lie in the face of everything that's going on. All right, so we're going to leave it here for now. We're going to leave it here because we're going to jump into a pretty intense dialogue between Jesus and Pilate. And I don't want to get into that. I want to make sure that we give it appropriate responsibility, because Pilate needs to come to some conclusion on this. I mean, this man's life is in Pilate's hands, and Pilate needs to come to some conclusion whether it is worth killing Jesus or not, whether Jesus deserves to die or not. And that's where this, comes into play. And that's where this comes into being, is it worth killing Jesus over this or not? And so that's where Pilate's going to go next. But I'm going to leave it here for now. As always, my contact information will come up after this session. Thank you for your willingness to participate. Thank you for your willingness to be part of this. It's a joy to be able to walk with you through this, and I pray that as we walk together, you're getting a benefit and you're getting something powerful out of this. May you be blessed in your day. May you be blessed in your week, and I will connect with you next week for session 51. But for now, be blessed, be well, and we'll talk to you soon.